Hey guys, I told you I'd give you a review lecture for those of you that like to have a little bit more information before you do the test. So that's what this is. Let's first go over the details of the test. Obviously, this is test number one. There's going to be 25 questions. You have 90 minutes, an hour and a half. You should be able to get this done in 15, but I'm giving you an hour and a half. Yes, it's timed. So once you start it, stay with it because you won't have the opportunity to do it again. It's 100 points. Remember, look at your syllabus so you can see how the breakdown of the class is. It's chapters 1, 2, and 3. The nice thing about the way I did the tests on Canvas is you can scroll through all 25 questions. When you submit at the end, it'll tell you what the right answers are, so you know immediately the feedback on what the right answer was. You can skip a question. You don't have to answer it if you don't know it. Come back to it. Again, so you've got 90 minutes. You got plenty of time. Once you hit submit, it'll give you that feedback. It'll go online on Canvas at midnight tonight. If you want to get it done and stay up till midnight, go ahead and do it at midnight. You can take it, and then it will close midnight Monday. So you got plenty of time to do it. What I would suggest is get your notes. Maybe watch the lecture videos again. Remember, a lot of it's going to be from my lectures. If you've taken good notes on my lectures, then you don't have to worry about it. But I'm going to go over the test. So I've got a hard copy I printed out, kind of give you an idea. Hey, buddy, kind of give you an idea of what's going to be on the test. So first off, absolutely, I'm going to want you to have an understanding of inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. So have your notes pulled up on that. I'm going to ask you a question about MO. If you don't know what MO is, go back to the lectures. I'm going to ask you questions about an investigation. What's a logical process of an investigation? Look at your notes. Look at the book. The book does a good job about talking about a logical process. Look in the book, when it talks about what a fact is. When we start to talk about a fact in a criminal case. So certainly look at that. Have an understanding of what criminalistics is and forensics. The primary duties. We talked about that at length at lecture. Primary duties. What are the goals of an investigator? Clearly go and look at what elements of a crime are. I want you to understand what the elements of a crime are and classifications of crime. We talked about in chapter 3 report writings, how, I like statistics. You'll see in my class a lot of times if it's an important statistic, how much percentage of time do we do on report writing? Have that down in your notes. And I like to give you those abbreviations, all the things, like when we have to, put a description of a suspect out over the airwaves. What do we call that? The person that talks to the media. What do we call that person? Who's in charge of a crime scene? We talked about at length that it must be a crime. How do we determine whether or not a crime existed? And then we talked about certain dates that I think are important. That we, in criminal justice, things that we did to make it easier as an investigator. So those dates. Look at those dates. What makes a good investigator. Look at the evidence portion of the chapters 1, 2, and 3. And then we talked at length at Swanson's 4 things that you should never do in a crime scene. So look back at those, have those ready in your notes. What should be on the top of every piece of paper in a police report. We talked at length. I even drew it on the whiteboard. What should be at the top of every paper in a police report. What we didn't talk a lot about as I'm looking over this test is, and I want to briefly mention this, if those of you that haven't watched this review lecture, you might miss this one because it is in the book, but it's one of those things, rarely do I try and find things in the book and then try and trick you. This is something we didn't really talk about in lecture. Because there's a lot of academics that think it exists, a lot of academics think it doesn't exist. I'll let you make that determination. And it's this whole idea that most of you watch TV so much that you see all these police dramas and these detective dramas, and you see when they go to court and they do all this fancy things like in CSI, and they do all this fancy stuff to prove that someone did a bad thing. So when we put juries together, a lot of people think that you have this expectation that we should have all this fancy stuff that we should be showing you on a jury. So if we don't show you this stuff on a jury, then a lot of jurors think that maybe we have a weak case. And so a lot of attorneys, prosecutors feel that they lose cases if they don't try and make things fancy in a trial. We call this the CSI effect because there's an expectation that we have a lot of fancy things that we have done. So again, have that in your notes. You shouldn't. If you just write that down, obviously it's going to be on the test. Whose responsibility is to secure a crime scene? Look about the crime scene, and that's pretty much it. But before I end, I want you, hopefully you caught on to something pretty important here, which is that clearly I'm looking at a test, and I have gone through the test page by page. So if you put your notes in order so that they follow along with what I just talked about, you should do a pretty good job. If you have any questions, send me an email. Good luck. Talk to you next week.